Earlier this year, I made a guide to how to choose your first luxury watch. In the video, I used some brands as reference points for what you can reasonably expect at a given price point. One of the brands I used was Sinn. Almost immediately, there were people in the comments saying they're not a good example of good value anymore at their price point. And it got me thinking, which brands have at one point been class leading or the point of reference, but aren't anymore? Which brands have fallen behind and why? Let's dive in. We might as well start with Sinn. Sinn is this relatively small and unassuming brand from Frankfurt, Germany. They are mainly known for an unapologetically tool-forward design of watches. They make watches that are built like tanks or in some cases out of submarines. They invest money in solid steel, extreme durability. They conform to high German DIN standards. They even have watches filled with oils, so the watches can go to 5,000 meters of depth without the watch becoming a 27 millimeter thick behemoth of a watch. The fan favorite watches are the Sinn 556, which is their Hamilton Murph or Nomos Club Sport. It's a tool-forward sports watch. There are the 104s and 105s, which are pilots and GMT watches with some of the most satisfying bezel clicks known to man. There's the U1, the U50, and several others that pull absolutely no punches when it comes to being a true solid dive watch. These are not desk divers. They are straight out of the submarine torpedo tube and off on a mission. I do agree. They're not a standard bearer for value in the same way that they were maybe 5 years ago. Their watches are still absolutely fabulous. They are still an unapologetic tool watch maker. But the Sinn 556 is 1,500 euros. It's got a very rudimentary level of finishing. It has a base Sellita SW200 and the bracelet is just ridiculously dated in terms of styling, but also in terms of finish, especially the clasp. You can find all manner of comparable sports watches from a host of other brands where you feature-wise can get the same for 1,000 to 1,300 euros. The Sinn U50 costs 2,600 euros. It's got 500 meters of depth rating. That's rare. Sinn have thrown a whole host of technologies at that watch. Tegimented steel, a certification for diving, which is a cut above what most other brands offer. It's solid, it's built like a tank, and on the rubber strap, it's just a watch that is every bit the business. But you will find that a lot of other brands offer very similar watches for a couple of hundred less or for the same, but with a better set of premium features. Sinn also have several chronographs with Sellita SW510 movements inside, which cost an easy 1,000 euros more than other brands with the same movement, and that includes brands like Hanhart. So what's going on? Well, there's three things going on. First, a lot of brands have simply caught up in terms of what I call premium features. And premium features are easy adjust mechanisms, quick release bracelets, smooth GMT bezels. A lot of the things that were a bit of Sinn's claim to fame have become relatively ubiquitous. It's not particularly unique to Sinn anymore to have these things. Second, Sinn has for the most part been very committed to very tool-centric designs that don't lend themselves to the kind of premium look you get from a desk diver from Longines or a sports watch like the Nomos Club Sport. The Sinns, by design, are just going to look less premium and less modern. The Sinn designs, in some cases, feel a little bit long in the tooth, and a mother of pearl 556 is a welcome addition, but the core watch is just a little bit rough and too rough and ready for a mother of pearl dial. Third, Sinn do all sorts of things that aren't those visible quality signifiers, and all those things cost money, but they don't always have a value to people. Sinn put extra testing work into achieving some obscure DIN standard. They do the whole tegimenting process, which not everybody understands, and the modifications they make to their movements to comply to their standards are not something that gets them a lot of talk. It's all under the hood kind of stuff that has a value, but it's in this if you know kind of space of details. So when you just grab a modern Sinn and compare it to some other brand in more or less the same space, so Christopher Ward, Formex, whoever, the other watches are just going to look and feel more premium. At first glance, you are not going to put a lot of stock into the things that Sinn prioritize when they've got an extremely dated bracelet. So who cares that they put a lot of money and effort into making a tegimented steel with a Dean standard dive standard when it's got a clasp that still feels super, super dated. More than half of the people watching this video are not subscribed. If you are one of those people that have not subscribed yet, please consider doing so by clicking the subscribe button below. On this channel, I talk about the watches that I love. I talk about watches, watch brands, and the watch market. I am unbiased, I'm in nobody's pocket, and I just talk about this little hobby that is so fantastic. So please subscribe, be hugely appreciated. Thanks a ton. Omega have also fallen behind. Now this one's going to get someone riled up and you'd think I'm doing it on purpose, but I'm not. First of all, just to be very clear, Omega are and still are some of the very best mass-produced watches in the world right now. When Omega says a watch has 30 meters of water resistance, it means it can actually handle 30 meters. An Omega master coaxial movement is probably the best mass-produced movement in the world. Some watches might be more accurate straight out of the door, but 3 years down the road, with knocks and scrapes and drops, the Omega movements are going to be closest to original spec, at least very often. They've got the 3-to-1 movement, that's super cool. Then there's the, I don't know, $500,000 Armand Duplantis movement. There's the chronograph chiming mechanism. Omega are very, very hard to beat. But there are two ways in which they've gotten worse. First, of all the watches in my collection, my Omega Speedmaster from 2015 is the watch in my collection that has increased most in retail price over the last 10 years. It's not a Panerai, it's not a Rolex, it's not a Jaeger-LeCoultre. The Jaeger-LeCoultre doesn't even come close. It's my Speedy. Because Omega have aggressively moved upmarket. That Speedmaster has on average for me gotten close to 7% more expensive every single year for 10 years in a row. That has made Omega, relatively speaking, a worse value proposition than it once was. Second, for everything that Omega does so very well, they have fallen behind, or their lead has shrunk in the specs races. And by that I mean the same races where brands tell you about the even higher megapixel resolution of camera sensors. If you know something about cameras and sensors, you'll know that more megapixels doesn't by definition mean more better. But it's one of those specs that's always thrown around as a selling point, even though it really isn't necessarily that important compared to more obscure specs like ISO or dynamic range. The same goes for top speeds of cars, those kind of things. And Omega is stuck at 50 or 60 hours of power reserve in a world where others are offering 70, 80, or even 120 hours of power reserve. The fact is, there's not a lot of people that really need 120 hours of power reserve. But in a spec for spec race, Omega has fallen behind. Do they also have the bragging rights commercially for a commercially available mass market 5 Hz movement? No. Are a vast majority of their cases too thick? Yes. Are there still multiple watches where the bracelets like the 300M are sorely in need of an update? Yes. Do they even have Metas as a claim to fame for themselves? No. Even Tudor can do that now, for less. So make no mistake, Omega are fantastic, and I still think they're a good buy, but they are nowhere near as compelling as they were 5 or 10 years ago. I could go both ways when it comes to Oris, because on the one hand, Oris has invested fairly significantly in in-house movements. They've pushed themselves upmarket with ProPilot X's and Aquis deep divers that are spec'd to the max. There are watches like the titanium Caliber 400 ProPilot X at $4,800, which I think are a very interesting value proposition. A lot of people will knock Oris for the step up in pricing that came from them transitioning more and more for those in-house movements, but I've never really agreed with that. I will any day defend a brand, I'll do that for Tudor as well, when they offer a more expensive product as long as you are getting more for the money. Because Tudor, the expense gave you the T-fit clasp and the Metas movement. And it's the same for Oris and their in-house movements. On the true self-developed calibers, I believe that Oris do some really interesting things that are worthy of at least paying attention. But it does feel like the entry-grade models, which still carry Salita movements with custom rotors, have gone up in price as well without a corresponding increase in quality. I have a really hard time understanding why a 39mm Oris diver's date with a Salita SW200 with a custom rotor has to cost $2,800. Monta, Christopher Ward, Formex. There are so many out there that can produce a watch with the exact same specs, a better bracelet, at easily $400 and even $800 less. You might even get COSC certification, which you won't in all Oris models. Now, the new diver's date is an improvement over the model it replaced, but it's still completely off in terms of pricing. For me, it's this tale of a mixed bag where some models and SKUs are completely reasonable and even quite compelling options, where others just have this kind of head-scratching price where it just feels like they had to raise it to not make the gap to the in-house calibers too big of a jump. What I do, though, think has been happening is a kind of improvement lag to their models. The Oris diver's date, like I said, was improved in a whole lot of ways. The 2024 Aquis also got a much better bracelet with a quick adjustment mechanism and even more premium bezel mechanism. Here, there, everywhere, you do see indications that they're improving pieces across the collection. But it does leave me with a feeling that they kind of increased prices without an immediate increase in features or quality. And now they're potentially slowly catching up, but they're not quite there yet on all models. If I really want to laugh, I will watch any video where Nico Leonard talks about Davide Serrato, the managing director at Bremont. Nico really doesn't like that guy, and I think it's probably reciprocated. It's hilarious to watch. And with Davide at the helm, most longtime Bremont fans felt that Bremont got worse. To them, that wasn't about quality or pricing. It's about taking a brand that was British in the most British of ways, that made, military watches, that shot the watches out of ejector seats to test them, and they turned it into what feels like a generic run-of-the-mill bland air, sea, and land brand. A brand with about as much personality as a soggy dishcloth. Now, personally, I can live with the new Stone Island rebrand. Air, sea, land is dull, but I'll live with it. My problem is, again, of course, with price. But here's a brand that actually did the opposite of everybody else. Where everybody else took good products and made them more expensive without improving the quality, Bremont took the same watch, lowered the quality, and offered you $5,200 for a Supermarine. I literally don't care about the marginal benefits of 904L over regular steel. 500 meters of water resistance is fine. This is the same price as a Black Bay 41 that has a META-certified in-house caliber with 70, 80 hours of power reserve. And the Bremont features a heavily modified, but still just a modified Sellita SW300. Then, on the other end of the scale, they have a 44,000 euro mono pusher perpetual calendar, which is impressive. It's got a base AMT movement inside and a complication itself, which is made by a company called Agenor. Agenor make badass complications for brands like Moser and Hermes. Initially, Bremont and Davide went out and talked about aiming for value. And then they do a limited edition 44,000 euro mono pusher perpetual calendar. It's like they don't know what they want to do, so they haven't picked a lane. The jump power thing is also an absolute disaster. But those watches, Bremont got worse in terms of value, for sure. Honorable mention, but any watch brand where the conglomerate owning them is filing for bankruptcy to restructure debt is not in a good place. So, Fossil. Short one, Franck Muller used to be a thing. They are not anymore. I would stay away. I think you'll hear from other high-end brands or brand pundits that you should buy the old Franck Muller stuff and not the new stuff. I tend to agree. Last one, and this one is tough. Seiko has gotten worse in the low end. It all started, I think it was in 2017, 2019, with the discontinuation of the SKX. Seiko, I think, realized that they had a really popular brand that was likely underpriced. At the same time, micro brands were also moving in on their space. So did Seiko improve quality at the low end? Not really. To be a little bit more precise, Seiko haven't gotten worse. Seiko has actually gotten better, but everybody else has just gotten a lot better. The crappy quality control on an SKX was part of the fun. But as a ton of other micro brands have come into the space with better bezels, better alignment, more accurate movements, Seiko kind of just chose to prioritize mostly making better upmarket models. So a new SK is better than an older SKX, but Seiko is just some distance in quality in almost all price points from a lot of other brands. The Prospex watches, which are the ones I follow the most, have gotten better, but so many others in that space offer more. So relatively speaking, Seiko isn't quite the value proposition that they used to be. You see it on the movements, you see it on the bracelets, you see it on the clasps. Not so much on the dials anymore, not so much on the bezels, but definitely bracelet, case, clasp, there you still see this lag, which just, they could do well to improve it. Generally, I'm of the opinion that watches are getting better and better every day. I'm also convinced that the market is so transparent that brands tend to align to each other in terms of quality, specs, and features. There's a ton of competition, and it keeps most brands from becoming lazy. But some have gotten worse, or have at least fallen behind, or someone have caught up to them. These were the ones I think aren't quite there in terms of where they used to be. Are they walking disasters? Not all of them, but they have seen better days. Those were my thoughts. Share your thoughts in the comments. Stay classy, also in the comments. Like, subscribe. Cheers.